There's only here, there's only now, there's only one life. That is God's life, that is Spirit's life, that is the life, the original moment when all of it began is now. There is only now. We had a wonderful song a couple of months ago on that topic. There is only now, and now, and now, kind of like a Jack Russell Terrier. Now is all we have. So what I know about now is love, is peace, is grace, is wisdom, is power. And that's that audacity thing, power. Let it move through me, unabated, and out into the world, because it's what I am. It's what each of us is. To the extent I can let go of my fears and doubts and be in that power, audacity is what shows up much of the time. I am so grateful for this. I am so grateful for this knowledge, this audacity that flows through me, that when I call something, it comes. When I ask Spirit for that thing or that feeling or that, I get it. What? That's power. That's Spirit moving through, in, and as me. Each of us is that. Reflecting into the world, being that flow. So today and all the time, I know love as flow, peace as flow, wisdom and power as flow, easy and graceful. I say yes to this wholeheartedly, audaciously. Yes. Can I get a yes? Yes. You hear that, Spirit? A yes has been offered and accepted. In the law, here it comes, and so it is.
You know, we're working on a year-long theme of a grand rising. And we can't have a grand rising. We can't expand into the greater whoever we are meant to be, whoever we've chosen to be, without a little boldness, yes? Because if we're timid, we're going to let all the other stuff outside of us kind of keep us in place. How many people here like to be kept in place? Right, I didn't expect any hands up. Because we're all here because we didn't stay in place where we were supposed to go in many cases from the church that we grew up in with our parents, yes? We said, no, I want something different. And so we're here. Before I get into my talk, I have a little voice that's not letting me sit still. So I want to speak to something. You may have noticed that this is an election year, yes? Has anybody noticed that? Okay. And that brings up a lot of something called duality. My tribe versus your tribe. Yes? Or versus those tribes or whatever. And we may have experienced some of that this past week as something significant happened to one of the tribal leaders. Yes? Breathe. Yesterday in our study group on Ernest the Silomar, one of the ministers who was in that group said, I don't say God and I are one, because that are implies a plurality. I say God and I is one. God and I is one. Now, I know if my former newsletter editor, Karen Lindberg, is listening to this, she's right now going, no! But I love that idea. God and I is one. But that also implies that any other person and I is one. Yes? Breathe, keep breathing. Whether it's a political figure, whether it's an ex-spouse, whether it's, whoever it is, whether it's the person you love most. That person and I is one because there's only one. There's only the oneness, yes? Breathe. And so we have different aspects of ourselves. Does anybody besides me have a couple of aspects of yourself that you don't really like that much? Great, thank you. I was hoping I wasn't being left to hang out to dry by myself. But if it was, I'm just talking to myself because you and I is one. And so we see people who embody aspects of ourselves that we don't like. And we can get into judgment and we can get into anger and all that stuff. Yes? Or we can do what we really want done with ourselves even when we are not exactly in alignment with our highest values. Anybody besides me say this week ever spend a moment out of alignment with your highest values? Yeah, okay. Do you want to be loved anyway? Do you want to be loved in spite of that? And so I invite us to do something that's different than the flow of all the energy we see out there publicly and say, no, I choose love instead. I audaciously choose to stand in love. Now, it doesn't mean standing in approval of behavior that's not appropriate, right? Okay? Because when I'm doing something that I don't approve of within myself, that I know isn't the highest and best of myself, I do something to shift and change that. Yes? So I invite us to do that. And people get into fear of what happens if this person gets elected. Whichever person it is, by the way. Today we got this one, years ago we had that one, years down the road we'll have another one. Yes? Okay? It's an ongoing process. We get it. We can go into fear. But I'm reminded of the last story in the book of Genesis of a guy named Joseph who had a multicolored coat. Remember him? Some of you who, hopefully. And he had a lovely childhood in which he was, for a while, his father's special son until his brothers got really jealous and after abusing him for a little while, beat the crap out of him, dumped him in a ditch, and then eventually sold him into slavery. You had a rough childhood too, right? Not only does he get sold into slavery, but the first person who owns him as a slave, the guy's wife thinks Daniel's hot, comes on to him, and he says, no, I'm not going to do that. And so she screams rape. And he gets thrown in jail, where he sits within support groups and therapists for years afterwards. No. Eventually, he gets made the second in command of all of Egypt in this story, and he's in charge of the food, right? And so there's a drought going on, and eventually his brothers come down from Israel, are begging for food, and he recognizes them before they recognize him, because he's kind of out of context, right? He doesn't look or feel the same way that the last time they saw him. And he messes with them for a little while, but finally he looks at them and says, what you did, you intended for evil, but God used it for good. The way that he got there was he stayed in touch with his true nature. He stayed in touch with his true self. Whatever goes on in the world, as we stay in touch with our true self, God is greater. And it comes to the question, what do I have faith in? Do I really have faith in the infinite presence that is always expanding for greater and greater good? Or do I have faith that this person or this situation over here is greater than me? Do I have greater faith in the disease than I do in the infinite health and wholeness of the infinite oneness? Where is my faith? What do I put it in? So I invite you this week to stay out of fear, to stay out of tribal duality. There's only one tribe here, right? There's only one tribe. The astronauts who go up in space say, I wish we could bring all the leaders up here to see there's no borders, there's no boundaries from that view. There's just the one of us. And so God and I is one, you and I is one, all of us is one. And I invite you to stay in that truth this week. Yeah. This month, this year. So, as a frightened person in a burning boat has only one way to the rest of their life. We must move with courage through the wall of flame into the greater sea. Mark Nepo from the Book of Awakening. And as I mentioned, our theme this month is Holy Boldness, and our talk today is Sacred Audacity. Sacred Audacity. So if we're to have, like I said, a true grand rising, we have to have some audacity, yes? We have to have some boldness. We can't sit there and say, I'm going to do the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and never change. We got to take a chance. We got to, as the song says, be together. I love there's a little refrain in there in the vamp, I believe it is, that says we got to be hard but not too hard. We got to be strong. We got to be tough. We must be audacious, but we must be sacredly audacious. That's the talk title, Sacred Audacity. In the dictionary, in Merriam-Webster, audacity has 3 definitions. The first one has an A and a B to it. And the 1A is intrepidly daring. B is recklessly bold. Number 2 is contemptuous of law, religion, or decorum. And number 3 is marked by originality and verve. Now we see a lot of that second definition, contemptuous of law, religion, or decorum going on in the world, yes? Have you noticed? And some of that 1B, recklessly bold. Recklessly bold is, hey, let's jump out of the plane without a parachute. That's recklessly bold. That's audacious. It's also stupid. We're talking here about sacred audacity, coming from that spirit, that presence within us, that love within us. So if we look at the universe, we see that the infinite creates with boldness and with audacity, yes? There isn't an occasional little star, once in 1 or 2 of them somewhere. There's billions of stars in billions of galaxies, yes? Perhaps even billions of universes, what we call universe, multiverses. It doesn't create timidly. You and I are not timid creations of the infinite. It's safer to create rocks. They don't mess the world up, right? But it kept on going in consciousness and said, let's do more, and let's do more, and let's do more, and suddenly here we are. That's audacious. Look at your neighbor and say, you are an audacious creation of the infinite. And you are an audacious creation of the infinite. I are. The poet Mary Oliver said, imagine everything you can imagine, then keep on going. Imagine everything you can imagine and then keep on going. In Zen, there's a saying that when you reach the top of the mountain, keep climbing. There's always more. As I've quoted from Ernest often, all of the good of the universe is available to us. Yes? All of it is available to us, but we'll only experience as much as we can embody. As much as we can embody. And what keeps us from this infinite good is our own beliefs and our own perceptions of obstacles. Eric Butterworth in the book Creative Life said, the mind of the infinite does not do things halfway. It is not possible that a plan will unfold in your mind without there being the knowledge of how it can be completed, the will and the persistence to go forward with it, and the supportive thoughts with which to work toward the end result. It is impossible, it is not possible, that a plan will unfold in your mind without there being the knowledge and the support and the will and the persistence for it to be completed. Isn't that wonderful? Now, here's the catch. It doesn't mean that the how will also show up in your mind. When you hear the call to something greater, the way is already there, opened, but you may not see it yet. Anybody have that experience where something is there and I don't see it yet, but you know it's there? So many great dreams and ideas have died or were never allowed birth because people couldn't immediately see the how and assumed that if they couldn't see it, it didn't exist. It wasn't there. But history is full of people who worked through seemingly insurmountable circumstances where there didn't seem to be a way, only to have the way opened as they committed to the journey or the path. Only as they said, even if I don't know how this is going to show up, I'm going for it. When Edison first started to create the light bulb, he didn't know how. It took him a lot of tries for hows. Anywhere between, from what I've heard, hundreds to thousands of ways to try to make the light bulb work, none of which he considered a failure, just more knowledge about how to not make a light bulb work, and therefore getting him closer to how to make it work. Our attitude, our outlook, and our willingness, and our perseverance, persistence, and resilience are critical to making this happen. See, there's a deep innate knowing within all of us. Yes, that's you. Look at your neighbor and say, there's a deep innate knowing within you. And if you combine that knowing with courage and tenacity, it can carry us through anything. Yes? For years, we knew there was a home for us. It was not the place where we were renting before. Yes? This community, many of you who've been here for a long time. It took 10 years for the how to show up. And then it took another year and a half for the how to manifest, going through, what do you call it with the county? Permits, the permitting process, and then the remodeling process. Trust me, this building did not look this nice when we got it. For those who are relatively new here, the only thing original is the 4 walls and the carpet in the fellowship hall. Everything else, including the ceiling, is completely new. It's a vision. Even the new front porch out there. You want to know what it's like to not be able to see something? I walked into this building yesterday, and I did not notice that there was a new front porch covering over there. It took until after I was through with my study group, and I was walking out, and Denny and Carol pulled up, and Denny said, "What do you think?" And I said, "About what?" The power of observation of the minister. As we work in, and I know I'm not alone in that, yes? As we work in partnership with Spirit, all things are truly possible. Get that. As we work in partnership with. If I try to do it all by myself, the chances are, especially if it's a big thing, it ain't going to happen because I don't know, I'm not big enough to know how it all happens, how to make it happen. So all things are truly possible with Spirit, even and especially that which our current knowledge tells us is impossible. Yes? Several people pointed out on Facebook last week that last week, May 25th, was the anniversary of the release of the first Star Wars film. I think it was only the 47th anniversary, nothing significant. But I saw a lot of chatter about, it's this is the day that Star Wars came out in 1977, And I remember that movie. First, the film itself was audacious, yes? The technology that went into that revolutionized film as we know it today. I remember I was there on the opening day because my cousin had seen the preview the night before, and he closed. I was working for his commercial photography studio. He closed the studio, grabbed all the art directors we knew, and about 10 of us went and saw the film in Portland, Oregon on the opening night. And you're sitting there, and this cool spaceship comes across. You go, "Wow, that's really cool! Wow, 2001: A Space Odyssey was the most special effects film up until that time. And then the destroyer comes across. Yes. Boom, And if you weren't there for that, for those of you who are younger, I'm so sorry because you've grown up on all sorts of other special effects and it's nothing to you. But for those of us who are old enough to remember, it's just like, oh my God, You're watching this thing happen. And then the story within it is told of a group of freedom fighters attempting the seemingly insurmountable task of attempting to stop a vicious and controlling empire with its weapon of mass destruction. Anybody remember what that was called? Thank you, the Death Star. And all the normal attempts to stop the Death Star, all the ways you would normally try to do this, were failing. And it was left to some farm kid from an obscure planet out in the middle of nowhere who was trying to use all the regular approved technology until he heard a voice telling him, let go and turn to his inner knowing. Use the Force, turn to his inner knowing. Much to the dismay of those in the control panel were saying, going, why are you turning off your targeting computer? Well, if you haven't seen it by now. And this is a retelling of the David and Goliath story out of the Bible, yes? Where to the dismay of David's own soldiers, he forgoes all the armor and the weapons that he would normally use to go battle this well-armed, heavily equipped giant. Instead shows up with two things: a slingshot and stones, and an absolute knowing and faith in God. Because he looks at Goliath and says, my God basically is bigger than you. My God is bigger than you. And so we look at any situation in our lives and can say, my God is bigger than you. There's a lovely thing in the Christian movement that says, don't tell your God how big your problem is, tell your problem how big your God is. Flips it. Yes. Take a breath. So the Sufi prophet Ghalib says, for the raindrop, joy is entering the river. For the raindrop, joy is entering the river. So one of the ways to live with boldness is to notice what brings us joy and aliveness. And when we notice that, we are more willing to live with boldness and creative audacity. When we connect with our aliveness, we connect with spirit within. Mark Nepo again says, when I think of the moments I have felt most alive, they all have this quality of joining the all of what I keep inside with the everything outside of me in a way that makes me forget myself. They all feel timeless and open-ended. Joy, it seems, is the feeling of that oneness. Joy is the feeling of that oneness. And he goes on to observe that it is the risk to love, to give our full attention to something that lets the what is eternal within emerge with what is eternal without, to allow the two of those to merge. In those moments of oneness, we as drops of spirit join the larger river of spirit. Take a breath. And that river doesn't care about the lines we draw, does it? It doesn't have boundaries, barriers, all that stuff. It doesn't care about the lines or the fences on our map of properness and social appropriateness. Nor the boundaries we have created in our own minds about our inadequacies that we use to justify playing small and staying safe. Who am I? And the answer is, you and God is one. You're the infinite presence. And so eventually the river, the spiritual river, overflows the banks we have built to try to control and direct this river of life. Our way, with our conditioned and limited perspective, which is always too small for the infinite spirit, yes? So this month's celebration and recognition of the rights of the LGBTQ plus folks, and by the way, I need to give a shout out to Tiffany Merkel, our administrative assistant, who spent hours, and I do mean hours. I think I was getting emails from her at like 11:30 last night, talking about finishing this up, and she did the table in the back and over there. So we're celebrating the rights of LGBTQ plus folks, something that once seemed impossible, yes? Including the right to marry who you wanted. What a concept. And it demonstrates that the river of love, which is the nature of the divine, cannot be fenced in by our limited ideas of who who can and who can't love each other, yes? And that who can and who can't love each other is a historic thing. It's a tribal thing. You know, if you belong to that tribe, you can't marry somebody from this tribe. Whatever the tribe has been, whether it's been a literal tribe, whether it's been a social structure, whether it's been an amount of money you have, whether it's been a race, whatever tribe. But love jumps all those fences, doesn't it? Bursts through all those dams. It says, yeah, the heck with that. You can hold me back for a little while, but not forever. Yes. And so like David, we stand in the firm knowing of the nature of the divine and are willing to embody. It's not enough to just know. We have to be willing to embody. We have to be willing to live it, that nature in our lives in the world. And it's also important to remember that all the important shifts in consciousness, whether personally in yourself or globally, take a little time, usually. Have you noticed? And persistent, consistent effort, often without seeing any immediate results, and often with setbacks and sacrifices along the way. You know, sometimes it's like this process of moving towards greater justice and greater freedom in the world is sort of like the stock market. Up, down, up, down, up, down. There's wins, there's losses. But the overall trend throughout human history has been upward. Valerie Kaur, who's a Sikh spiritual leader and activist, reminds us that this working towards greater freedom was going on before we were born. It will continue after we die. But we have our part to play in this moment, in this time. And are we going to lift up, or are we going to just pretend nothing's happening, or are we going to take it down? And I invite us to be audacious and support the lifting up. Boldness takes picking ourselves back up, perhaps reassessing our how, but if we know we're in alignment with the highest and best for all, keeping on. I've been watching the Collegiate Women's Softball World Series and all the regionals leading up to that. And Stanford has a pitcher, her name is Najeri Kennedy, who's considered the best in the country, but twice she has had lousy games, opening games, and the team has lost. But she picks herself up and comes back, and in the second game, they have come back and trounced. I mean, totally trounced. There's something in softball, in women's softball, called a run rule elimination, where if you get 8 runs more than the other team before the game is over, they're done, right? And she has come back twice in Stanford with her to do 8-0 shutouts of other teams, including higher-ranked teams. So she picks herself up, and they pick themselves up like we are, and not let the initial setback take them down, determine what comes next. So we have to pick ourselves up and not determine. Some of us have had setbacks, yes? 1 or 2 I know of you have. The rest never have, but we've all had setbacks. But that's not what determines us. What determines us is what we do next. So as we choose to live in greater boldness, we don't have to be recklessly bold, i.e. stupid. We don't have to be contemptuous, and we can move at our pace as long as we are moving, stretching into our greater potential, getting support, using our spiritual tools to help us as we express greater good both in our own lives and in the world. And most importantly, as we use the force. We're always presented with the choice to build and hide behind fences, or to dive in and swim in that infinite river of joy. So I invite you with boldness to go into that infinite flow and to boldly go where you've never gone before. Including the fact that Star Trek and Star Wars were never supposed to come together. So this week, one spiritual practice: connect or reconnect with the dream that has been calling you. You know it's there. And say yes. Boldly say yes. Get support Because we all have our Goliaths, we all have our Death Stars to deal with, yes? You know, Luke didn't go out by himself, he had support. He had somebody whispering in his ear reminding him, use the Force, stupid. I don't think that was quite the line. We have practitioners who will help you to remember to use the Force. So get support, knowing it's not you but the Spirit within that does the work. I want to close with a quote from Audre Lorde, who's a powerful and inspirational lesbian African-American activist. And she says, when I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision. Remember last week we talked about the vision-led life. Having that vision, having that power. Then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. We have an affirmation. We'll say this together. I live and love audaciously and freely in the divine flow. One more time. I live and love audaciously and freely in the divine flow. And so it is. Thank you.